Hello, I'm back. It's Mr. Harris. Today we're going to talk about the practices of World War One. Specifically, we're going to spend time talking about the years 1914 to 1915, so the outbreak of the war until about 1915. All right, and then we'll come back and talk about the weaponry and new tactics used during the war. All right, so pay close attention. All right. So, of course, the war we know has two opposing sides. On one side, we had the Allies or the Entente powers, of course, Britain and its empire. So, not just Britain, but all of those places that represent Britain and its colonial interests. So, we're talking about troops from Australia, Canada, India, and New Zealand, France, Russia, of course, which left in December. All right. 1917, Italy, which entered May 1915, Serbia, Belgium, Romania, and then, of course, the USA entered in 1917, and Japan. Then the Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, which entered in November 1914, and then Bulgaria. There you see a map of the Central Powers, the Entente Powers, all right, and their sort of allies. So, the outbreak of war, let's say, was thought to be going to what many thought it was going to be, a short, decisive affair. All right, that was sort of over in 1914, like most of the other European wars. All right. However, there were a couple of key or significant events that sort of started that caused the war to sort of prolong. The Germans failed to achieve rapid defeat of France, as outlined in the Schlieffen Plan, as we've talked about. All right, and this is going to cause Paris and sort of not to fall, and a stalemate is quickly going to develop. And this whole idea of trench warfare, this new form of fighting, is going to help to fuel or spark the war to last longer than what was anticipated. All right. Here you see a map of the Schlieffen Plan, which I was just referencing. All right. German swift uh, attack through Belgium to invade France and to circle around the city of Paris. All right. So the Schlieffen Plan, all right. Once again, it was intended that German right wing would move swiftly through Belgium to the coast. All right. They were going to capture the Channel ports and then sweep round in a wide arc to the west and south of Paris. All right. So they wanted to basically surround the French armies in the capital, Paris. All right. So the Schlieffen Plan, strong Belgian resistance. They did not anticipate Belgium to put up such a strong fight. All right. And they failed to capture, of course, the English Channel ports and to outflank the French armies. And of course, the first Battle of the Marne, which we're going to talk about, was going to sort of halt German advances or slow them down. Okay, so 1914 on the Western Front, Germany we know now is fighting a two-front war. All right. So on the Western Front, however, German advance was held up by unexpected, like I said, strong Belgian resistance. All right. One of the things that we're going to see is that it took over 2 weeks to capture Brussels, which is, of course, the Belgian capital. And this delay is really what's going to help British troops to mobilize. All right. And, of course, the channel was free, the English Channel, and it allowed the British expeditionary forces to actually land on continental Europe. Now, Germans found themselves east of Paris. All right. They were making their way to the city, but they were held up. All right. And as a result of this holdup, it's going to be hard to supply the German army with the food and ammunition that it needs. And of course, it was summer, so troops are going to be exhausted, all right, with the heat. Now, the Battle of the Marne. All right, Germans were attacked by the French under General Joffre in the Battle of the Marne. All right, and of course, it was this battle was particularly important. All right, and you want to take note of that because some historians say that this was one of the most decisive battles in modern history. All right, because for one, it ruined the plan for war that we've talked about time and time again, the Schlieffen Plan, and France was not going to be sort of quote unquote knocked out of the war very quickly. All right, um, and this of course sort of fueled German fear of fighting a war on two fronts because we have Russia on the eastern front. All right, And this was no longer a war of movement because these long lines of trenches, and we're going to look at this when you come to class, these trench lines sort of stretch, all right, from the Alps to the Channel coast. And that sort of will cause a stalemate, which is going to cause the war to last longer than anticipated. All right, and of course the British Navy, all right, they were able to blockade German ports. Remember, the British had a very strong navy. Now, 1914, on the Eastern Front, of course, Russia is going to sort of mobilize quickly, and it's quicker actually than what the Germans expected. Now, Russia invaded both Austria and Germany at the same time. All right. Now, Austrian forces weren't quite as strong as the German forces, so Russia was able to defeat them. Um, well, they were very successful against them at first. All right, and Russia was able to defeat the Germans twice. Russians, were defeated by the Germans twice at the Battle of Tannenberg and Masurian Lakes. All right, and this drove the Russians out of Germany. Very important key right here. All right, Russians were defeated by the Germans twice. All right, so why were the battles of Tannenberg and Masurian Lakes important? Well, one of the things you want to know is that this ate up a lot of Russian supplies, so to speak. All right, Russians lost vast amounts of equipment and ammunition, and also 1/3 of Russian armies were without rifles, which is hard to compete with the German military. All right, and these two battles, it made it very hard for Russia to recover from the setback. Okay. Now, Turkey in 1914 is going to enter the war on the side of Russia. All right, and Turkey was going to enter on the side of the Central Power. All right, and Turkey would cut the main supply and trade route from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean because they were on that strategic port, Constantinople. In 1914, the Serbs are going to drive out Austrian invasion, and Austrian morale was sort of at a rock bottom. So Austrians were defeated by Serbia. All right. Now, let's flash forward to the year 1915 with the stalemate in the West. Several attempts were made to break through the trench lines. This whole idea of trench warfare, this new form of fighting. All right, trench warfare. To describe trench warfare, of course, there was sort of barbed wire. That was between no man's land and then the two lines of opposing trenches. So you had two lines of trenches, the opposing sides fighting. All right, and then there was a series of barbed wire that you called no man's land. All right, so the opposing side would try to throw massive artillery bombardment bombs and whatnot, and they remove any chance of a quick surprise attack since the enemy had plenty of warning. All right, so you kind of knew when the enemy was trying to attack or press forward. Now, reconnaissance aircraft and observation balloons could spot concentration of troops on roads leading up to the trenches. So this new form of these reconnaissance planes allowed and alerted troops of when the enemy was coming. And of course, there was increased firepower, was provided by magazine rifles and machine guns. All right. Now, if a trench line was breached, advance was difficult because the ground had been churned up by the artillery barrage and more machine gun fire, so it was very hard to cross no man's land. And if ground was won, it was difficult to defend because it formed a salient, and a salient basically like a bulge in the trench line. All right, and of course the sides, of course, were very vulnerable to attack because troops could be surrounded on the bulge. All right, and cut off. Here you see a map of the or diagram, of the trench cross section. All right, you have the sandbag. This is the dugout. All right, where the troops were, and of course the fire step, and you see where they would load the guns for the ammunition, and barbed wire, and we'll talk about no man's land here. All right, the enemy, of course, was over here. All right. So let's go back to the Eastern Front in 1915. All right, Russian victory was very mixed. They had success against Austria. Once again, Austria's military wasn't quite as strong. Now, they did suffer huge defeats against the Germans, who captured Warsaw and all of Poland. All right, and of course, when Turkey entered the war, they're going to block the Dardanelles, all right, which was hard to sort of get ammunition and supplies to the Russian army. So this cut off a lot of their supply line. All right, and then the Gallipoli campaign, which was by Winston Churchill, when Britain entered the war, was launched to sort of clear the Dardanelles and open up supply lines to Russia. All right, but this whole Gallipoli campaign that was pushed by Winston Churchill, who was, of course, Britain's first Lord of Admiralty, um, was not very successful. All right. Now, the thought behind it was that the Turks were the weakest of the Central Powers because of their unstable government. However, success against Turkey would help them to sort of send supplies to Russia, and they thought it would bring Bulgaria, Greece, and Romania into the war on the Allied side and attack Austria from the south. All right, but the Gallipoli campaign was a failure. All right, the first attempt in March to attack through the Dardanelles to capture Constantinople failed when ships ran into a series of mines. All right. Now these mines it ruined the surprise element, and now the Turks were able to prepare because they knew enemy quote unquote was coming. All right, and so by December, all forces were withdrawn. Now the consequences of this Gallipoli campaign, all right, it sort of served as a blow to the Allies. All right, and it was sort of the last chance that the Allies thought to help Russia through links of the Black Sea. All right, it made Bulgaria actually join the Central Powers. All right. Now, of course, we all know Bulgaria is going to enter the war, and they're going after Serbia, and they were quickly overrun by Bulgarians and Germans. All right, Serbia was. All right, and here you see the Gallipoli campaign. All right, and this is sort of where we have the gunfire. All right, and this is going through the Dardanelles. All right, and we have the series of mines that are going to blow up the ships as they're coming in and cause Turkish forces to sort of mobilize and to prepare for battle. All right, so in 1915, Italy is going to declare war, and they actually entered on the side of the Allies, and they wanted to seize all of Austria-Hungary's Italian-speaking provinces, as well as territory along the eastern shore of the Adriatic Sea. All right, and so there was a secret treaty that was signed, and the Allies promised lands and some islands on the Aegean Sea, and a protectorate over Albania. All right. The Allies hoped to keep Austrian troops occupied and to relieve pressure off of the Russians. All right. And there you have it, part one of the war, 1914 to 1915.